everybody, how you doing out there? Thanks for joining me. Please take a second to share this. But they admitted it. They admit they behind closed doors. They don't want to say it to us, but Wall Street. This is a White House connected fund that has said war with China is good for business. We all know that's what they say behind closed doors, but then you see it, and the level of sociopathy that goes on in these. Anyway, I'll get into that. And I'll have more words. I'm gonna find. There's all the words I'm searching for right now. I'll find them in a minute. Just give me a second. Give me a second to warm up, to really start coming in hot. But I'm going to get into that. I'm going to get into the U.S. government has stolen the Venezuelan embassy again. Nicaragua did something amazing to get the U.S. back. So, this is beautiful. This is every country should do this. What Nicaragua did. Another major city. I don't mean another one, but another story. A major city has cut all ties with Israel because it's an apartheid state. That's what they say. I would never say that. I would never, except for on the last live stream and the one before that and the one before that. Thanks for being here. And please share this. Click thumbs up. Click join. Click follow. Click I'm going to follow you from a distance. Click I'm going to look at you from across the way. Click that you're a fan. And click the lover button. Click the secret mistress button. Click all those. And thanks for being here. All right, let's get into this main story, though. Oh, I'm also going to show you the new episode of Most Censored News. You'll get to check that out if you haven't already seen it. That'll be at the end. So if you have already seen it, you can dip out early if you have to. But so a White House-linked venture capital fund is boasting that war in China would be great for business. A war between China and Taiwan, which let's be serious here. If there were to begin a war between China and Taiwan, it would be very similar to the war in Ukraine in that it would be a proxy war created, funded, and armed by the United States. So it would really be war with the United States in many ways, just like the war in Ukraine is war with the United States in many ways. So it would be a proxy war. It wouldn't just be China and Taiwan going at it and the U.S. from afar going, oh, man. They shouldn't be doing that. A war between China and Taiwan will be extremely good for business at America's Frontier Fund, a tech investment outfit whose co-founder and CEO sits on both the State Department Foreign Affairs Policy Board and President Joe Biden's Intelligence Advisory Board, according to audio from a February 1st event. This is a guy connected to, not only is he the head of this fund, but he's also connected to the State Department Foreign Affairs Policy Board, Joe Biden's Intelligence Advisory Board, and as I'll tell you about in a minute, he's also former CIA. So that's, and so it's not like, when I say like Wall Street says that war would be good for business, this is not just Wall Street. This is one of the highest level people, White House, State Department, CIA, saying that war is good. War with a nuclear power is good for business. No, it's fucking not. It's not good for the people that die. It's not good for the people that die, even if we don't end up in a goddamn nuclear holocaust. Oh, yeah, I forgot to say, yes, for those of you missing Eleanor Goldfield. I'm sorry, she will not be on this one. She is off somewhere showing her movie it's not called a premiere. It's been out for a couple years now, but an event, Hard Road of Hope. If you haven't seen her movie, you should totally check it out. Amazing documentary, won all kinds of awards about the destruction of fracking and mining. Anyway, so I'm sorry, but she will not be here for this episode. I forgot to mention that, and I feel bad for those of you thinking any moment now she's going to come in on wires like a Lady Gaga concert. Any minute. Sorry. I'm sorry that I forgot to mention that. The remarks occurred at a tech finance symposium hosted at the Manhattan offices of Silicon Valley Bank. According to attendee Jack Paulson, head of the watchdog group Tech Inquiry, an individual who identified himself as Tom attended the event in place of Jordan Balshek, America's Frontier Funds president and chief operating officer. I don't even get the identified as thing. I guess it's so his statements by the president and COO can't be attributed to him or something. I don't know. Anyway, he held forth on AFF's investment in so-called choke points, which sound like bad, but apparently that's a good thing. Sectors that would spike in value during a volatile geopolitical crisis like computer chips or rare earth minerals. It turns out, according to audio published by Paulson, that a war in the Pacific would be tremendous for AFF's bottom line. Oh, it would just be fucking tremendous for us to be on the brink of nuclear catastrophe. It would just be so good, you know. It would help my stock portfolio. I could probably get a second yacht. I could, you know, the 113 sweaters I have for my dog are looking a little ratty, and so I could get a new one of those. And really, I want him to really up his wardrobe game. And so I feel like if we can just get a massive war with China, then all will be right in the world. Here's the quote. If the China-Taiwan situation happens, some of our investment will 10 times overnight. We'll multiply by 10 times overnight. So I don't want to share the name, but the one example I gave was a critical, this is still the quote, is a critical component that the total market value is $200 million, but it is a critical component to a $50 billion market cap. That's like a choke point, right? And so if it's only produced in China, for example, and there's a kinetic event, kinetic means fucking war, event in the Pacific, that would be 10 times overnight, like no question about it. There's a couple of different things like that. So he's saying that we own or are invested in certain things. At the moment a war spikes off with China, then they're going to do great. They're going to do great. And again, this is not just a big league player in Wall Street saying this. This is a top advisor for Biden. This is a top level person in the State Department. This is a former top level CIA person. So this is not just Wall Street's view. This is how the thinking is in much of our ruling class and much of our ruling elite. They don't care if people die. They don't care if we die. They don't care if Ukrainians are dying. They don't care if Taiwanese are dying. They don't give a fuck as long as it helps their bottom line. That's what they're saying behind closed doors. You just don't often get to see it or hear it. This is what they say when they close the doors. Gilman Louie, AFF's co-founder and current CEO, serves as chair of the National Intelligence University, advises Biden through his Intelligence Advisory Board, and was tapped for the State Department's Foreign Affairs Policy Board by Secretary of State Antony Blinken in 2022. And it's just one sentence here, but Louie previously ran In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital arm. In-Q-Tel, many of you have heard of that before. That's like the CIA funding things when they don't want it to look like the CIA's funding things. So they have this venture capitalist arm called In-Q-Tel. This guy was the fucking CEO or what, president of it, whatever it's called, of In-Q-Tel. It's just, these people are psychopaths, and you don't often get to see word for word. You don't often get to see them saying it, but here they are saying it. And I wanted to show you some other examples of this because this is not the only time this has happened. It's not the first time this has happened. This is what they believe behind closed doors, and every once in a while it leaks out. So here's another example. I remembered this from several years ago, and I Googled it to find an article about it, and I started reading the article about it. And you know, as I'm reading it, I'm like, I kind of like this, the way this guy writes. This guy's not a bad writer. I think I'm a fan of this journalist. And then I realized it was me. Oh, I'm such an asshole. No, but I seriously was like reading it, and then I was like, some of these phrases sound weirdly familiar. Why is this guy cursing if he's a journalist? And then I realized this was reprinted. So I'm reading it at this other outlet, but it was reprinted, and it's by me. I wrote it in 2018 for TruthDig, back when TruthDig was a thing. And apparently this outlet just reposted it in 2021. But here's what it's about. In a recent report, a Goldman Sachs, make this a little bigger. A Goldman Sachs analyst asked clients, quote, "Is curing patients a sustainable business model?" Salveen Richter wrote, and you get what that's, I mean, maybe I'm over-explaining this, and I apologize for that, but is it a sustainable, meaning should we invest in curing things? Is that a sustainable business model, or should we just not invest in curing stuff? And then the analyst gave an example, the potential. So again, if I didn't say this, this report went out to basically highest level Goldman Sachs investors. This is not something that your average people get to see. It's not meant for media, but it was leaked. Quote, "The potential to deliver one-shot cures, or a cure, period, is one of the most attractive aspects of gene therapy. However, such investments offer a very different outlook with regard to recurring revenue versus chronic therapies. While this proposition carries tremendous value for patients and society, it could represent a challenge for genome medicine developers looking for sustained cash flow." Why are you looking for sustained cash flow? Why not just want to cure people? You fucking psychopath. But this is how they think. This is how capitalism works, right? The people who are at the top of these industries, ask yourself, how did they get to the top of those industries? Did they get to the top of those industries by just curing things when there's not a sustainable business model? Is that how they got there? I don't think so. I think they got to the top of Goldman Sachs, or the top investors of Goldman Sachs. I think they got there by investing things that give them lots of money and are not cures, because cures, you get a payment from the patient, right, in the US, because our medical system is fucking awful. You get a payment, but just once for that cure. If it's a one-shot cure, yes, you may get $100,000, $500,000, $800,000 for someone paying for that cure, but you only get it once. You don't have sustaining income from your investment in a cure. Yeah, so then this is from the article that someone named Lee Camp wrote. Yes, a Goldman analyst has said outright that curing people will hurt their cash flow. And he said that in a note designed to steer clients away from investing in cures. The analyst also said, in the case of infectious diseases such as hepatitis C, curing existing patients also decreases the number of carriers able to transmit the virus to new patients. They're not just saying that, hey, if you invest in a cure, you only get paid once. They're not just saying that'd be bad enough, right? But this person is also saying, also, let's remember that if you invest in a cure and it's an infectious thing, that person's not infecting others. They're not giving others the disease or the illness that you get money every time someone tries to treat it. So basically, this analyst is saying that Goldman Sachs and Goldman Sachs investors are really in a financial partnership with infectious disease. I mean, that's understandable to me, because they are an infectious disease. I mean, they are a fucking, all the analogies you can think of. They are a parasite. They're fucking gonorrhea. That's what they are. That's what they are. And that's what we should call them. But so this is another example. So these two things, right? One is one of the largest venture capital funds says that a catastrophic war that would kill, even if it were just between China and Taiwan, even if it were just legit firing back and forth between China and Taiwan. I mean, I don't think that would last very long, but kill thousands, let's say. Let's be generous on the low end and say thousands. These people are saying that'd be great for business, though. Now, here's another example from a few years ago where you got Goldman Sachs saying, well, let's not invest in cures because that's not good for us. So, yeah, thousands may die from this. Millions may die from this, from not investing in cures, but it's good for us. It's good for us. And then I have one more example. And actually, there was an example that I couldn't find. It was several years ago, and I couldn't find it easily, but I believe it was Maryland Houston. It was a CEO of one of the weapons contractors, one of the top weapons contractors, I believe Maryland Houston, Lockheed Martin, who said on an investor call, basically said that the impending war with Iran, or the belligerence towards Iran by the U.S., is a real growth area for us. Basically said war with Iran, or the risk, even just the specter of war with Iran, is really looking good for us, really looking up. We're pretty excited about that. That's what she said on a call. But again, I couldn't find that one on short notice. But here's another one. In case you need more proof that Wall Street, but capitalism in general. But we're kind of focused on Wall Street, weapons contractors, etc. right now. But is profit over all else, including millions of lives. And this is a couple of years ago. Arms manufacturers tell investors that Iran tension fuels business. They got together, nice big old meeting. Thank you, none OYB. They got together in a meeting, and let's see here. Eric DeMarco, the president of Kratos Defense and Security Solutions, addressed the conference, arguing that his company is very well aligned for the shift in the military budget away from asymmetrical fighting toward nation-state warfare. The rising threat of war with Iran, Russia, and China, DeMarco continued, could threaten U.S. naval power, which could require ballistic missile threat upgrades, the type of systems Kratos Defense specializes in. Large arms manufacturers from across the industry have similarly told investors that escalating conflict with Iran could be good for business. So this is common, this type of sociopathic thinking. And I know that it's tempting, because a lot of people don't like to criticize capitalism. It's against their religion. It's tempting to go, to just immediately think, God, those people are fucking crazy. We got to get those maniacs out of there. Some people even go, man, if we just got the guillotines out and really took them out. And it's like, yes, that would be a blast, be a good time, be like a Mardi Gras or something. But that wouldn't actually change anything. It's an incentive structure. We have an incentives disorder in this economic system, in which people are incentivized to respect and go after profit over all else. And they slowly become sociopaths if they weren't already. So they become sociopaths, or the sociopaths are rewarded and get pushed to the top of the systems. And that's why you have this on multiple levels. I've given you 4 examples, and that's just off the top of my head, of this type of thinking coming out. And this is how the system works. So for people that just go, well, this guy's a psychopath, or that guy's a psychopath, or fucking Joe Biden, or Mitch McConnell, it's like, yes, those assholes are at the top of the system. Or you can even talk to the other ones, the fucking CEOs and the Elon Musks and the Bezoses and the Klaus Schwabs and all those assholes. You can point to all of them and say, hey, awful. And at times I do. I've done whole segments on maybe all those people. But I at some point during those segments, I will say, but this is an incentives disorder in which in the capitalist system, it is profit over life, liberty, health, sustainability, all of it. And that's how this system works. And if you listen to other folks that won't get that deep in it, then they don't really understand it, or they've made an active choice to not tell you about it. All right, next story. I got to move quick here because there's a lot of important shit going on. This is an update on the Cobb City story, and actually, I forgot to tease this one. Forgot to give the little hype on this one. An update on what's going on in Cobb City, where Atlanta police murdered a forest defender. I've covered that on this show. A unarmed person defending the forest there, as Atlanta goes in to try and knock down 100 acres worth of forest to put in a fake town for cops to train on brutalizing citizens, as well as film some Hollywood movies there. Isn't it nice when like you can get together? You're like, on the weekends we'll train to murder citizens, but on the weekdays you'll have like Julia Roberts and come on, Lee, name someone modern so you can pretend like you understand pop culture nowadays. And Charlize Theron. Nope, still couldn't do it. I mean, she's quasi-modern. Name one of those hot 20-year-olds. And I meant, I wasn't male or female, all right? I didn't mean, anyway, hot 20-year-olds, it's all over everybody's TV screen. And Elizabeth Taylor, Michelle Pfeiffer. I don't know. Anyway. Okay. But so to get to this Cop City update. So someone said the important thing is you tried. Thank you for that's the most patronizing thing anyone's ever said to me. So Cop City, they go in there, they brutalized plenty of the people there, but they kill one of them. Atlanta police have actively murdered a forest offender that is there. They're living amongst the trees. They're living, some of them, I think, in the trees in order to stop the trees from being cut down. Amazing activists. And they have murdered him, cold blood. And they tried to say that, oh, well, the cops were defending themselves, right? And some of you thought, I bet that's not true. So here is one of the latest updates. From Common Dreams, pressure continues to mount against Cop City project as body cam footage is released. And I feel like they should have put it in the title. The body camera footage is refuting what the cops have said. On February 8th, the Atlanta Police Department released videos of the January 18th raid on the Weelaunee Forest, during which Georgia State Patrol, GSP. So there's multiple police agencies there. There's Atlanta PD, Police Department, and then there's Georgia State Patrol there. And you know what? A bunch of guys, and it is mainly guys, but I'm sure there's some women there. But well, you know what? A bunch of folks with guns who have gone running into an area and they're from different departments. You know what that causes? Fucking chaos. During which GSP assassinated forest defender Manuel Tortuguita Esteban Paez Terran. One video shows the moments before and after GSP troopers opened fire on Tortuguita. An APD officer, so this is the other department, this is Atlanta Police, is standing some 100 feet from the tent where Tortuguita was killed and can be heard saying, "Man, you fucked your own officer up," meaning cops firing on cops, in reference to the GSP trooper that was also shot. Another officer wonders, did they shoot their own in there? Another responds, So I get the impression from this that you can't see much, but you can overhear these cops talking about what happened and basically saying it was cops firing on cops and they killed a protester, either in the crossfire or they saw a fellow cop with a gun, shot him, and also shot a protester. But whatever it is, it's fucking not the story that the police are giving. And big surprise, it's not what they were trying to make us believe. And this is the shit you're not getting from your mainstream media. Very, very little mainstream media has even covered this assassination. Some has a little bit, but they'll often, if CNN has covered it, they'll do like a 2-minute report where they mention that a protester was killed and they act like that's all they need to do. And then they can say they covered it and move on with their lives. But there's the update. Again, this is one of those things where you go, well, we could have guessed that. Yeah, well, you could have guessed it. Absolutely. But It is different when you see the evidence and see the proof. And for everybody fighting down there in Atlanta, just stay strong. And I don't know, I want to say be safe, just because it shows that I don't want any more harm done to anyone, but I never really quite understand what be safe means. Does it mean go home and sit in your living room? Does it mean don't have violent idiot cops with guns running around? Because that'd be nice. All right, so moving on, there's been a bunch of things about Latin America. Let's see. A couple of things that you're not going to get from your mainstream media. All right, I'll do this amazing Nicaragua story first. So Nicaragua, as you know, it is a Sandinista government. President Ortega down there. So the U.S. is absolutely livid that there's a socialist government there, that they've had success. I did a video just recently on how, and this is a Gallup poll. This is not coming from some one of those Latin American pollsters that always lies to us about what's happening down there. This is a Gallup poll that found that Nicaraguans are the most peace-filled citizens in the world. Not meaning they behave peacefully, which they do that as well, but for the most part, but meaning when polled as to how often and this was actually, do they feel peaceful at mind? Do they feel that they are at peace most or all of their lives, meaning their day to day? And Nicaragua was at the top of that list, number one in the world for feeling at peace every day of their lives. So in that way, these are the most peaceful people on the planet, which, I think you got to some degree thank a government if people feel that way. And then on top of that, they are, relative to the rest of Latin America, or relative to neighboring countries, doing quite well. Now, that does not mean people aren't in poverty there. There are people in poverty, but the U.S. has committed an egregious economic war against them. So of course there's going to be poverty. For example, I know it's incredibly difficult to get electronics down there because many electronics can't be made in Nicaragua. And because of the economic war on them, they can't easily ship them in. So it's very difficult to get, say, a smartphone down there and that kind of thing. So there are differences in life, but it's due to our economic war on them. It's not like Ortega is like, nary a person should have a smartphone. Anyway, that's just kind of a background about Nicaragua. A few years ago, I think it was 2018. Was it 2018? Or was it more recent? Let's see if this says. Sorry, I don't want to give you the wrong year. I don't know. Maybe we'll come across it. I think it was 2018. But the U.S. created a standard U.S. backed coup in Nicaragua, where they fund and sometimes even arm right-wingers, far right-wingers, that are willing to do things like set innocent people on fire, which I think happened in this case. And they hope that there will be a very repressive response by the government. Sometimes there is, depending on the country. But they hope there will be a very repressive response from the government, which then gets more people out in the streets, more people furious. And then Washington can point at that and go, look at that repressive government. So it's an ongoing tactic. It's done in many countries by the U.S., done in many countries. Sometimes it's successful, like Bolivia. It was successful for a year. They dragged leftist mayors out of their home and shaved their heads and covered them in paint. I mean, this is the ones they didn't kill, but shaved their heads, covered them in paint, and dragged them behind, cars or vehicles or whatever, and humiliated them. And this is the type of thing the U.S. funded in Bolivia. And it succeeded for a year. And then the people came together and again voted the leftist government back into power. But it succeeded for a year. In Nicaragua, they tried it a few years ago against Ortega, and it completely failed, did not succeed. So here is what Nicaragua just did. Now, Nicaragua, of course, as pretty much any country, except for maybe Venezuela, would have done. They arrested the people that planned and operated the coup. In Venezuela, Maduro let Guaido run around the country calling for a coup, calling for a U.S. invasion, calling for the military to stand up and kill Maduro. He let Guaido run around the country free the entire time. Actually, we'll talk more about Venezuela in a moment. But anyway, so here's a more legitimate outlet. Is this at least legitimate coverage of it? This is Telesur talking about what happened. Nicaraguan Assembly deports 222 traitors, what they call traitors, to the homeland. Now, if there were a coup, even if you hated the government, even if you viewed it as a completely false government, if people stood up and tried to create a coup, you could understand why they would be called traitors to the homeland. That would be common no matter what the country was. On Thursday, the National Assembly approved or reformed Article 21 of the Constitution, by which it established that all traitors to the homeland lose their Nicaraguan nationality. This bill was sent by the Sandinista National Liberation Front and approved with 89 votes in favor. As a result of the new norm, 222 traitors to the homeland will be deported. And given all these legal changes prompted immediate effects, a Managua Court of Appeals ordered the deportation of 222 U.S.-backed activists who were previously jailed for crimes such as incitement to violence, terrorism, and economic destabilization. So these are the people that were the leaders of this U.S.-backed coup, and they sent them to Washington, D.C., which is amazing. They gave them a choice. They said, you're losing your citizenship. Do you want to go to Washington, D.C.? And I think all of them, except for like two, said yes. So they shipped them to Washington, D.C. So basically, Nicaragua has deposited the coup creators, the U.S. funded and backed coup creators, on the doorstep of the White House and said, here, you can have them. You do with them as you see fit. They're yours. Which I think that's amazing. I think that's what every country should do when the U.S. funds and backs these coups, which we do just endlessly. Just ship the people involved to the White House, leave them on the lawn, and say, hey, we found some orphans. They're yours now. Do with them as you see fit. But that being said, so I showed you how it's covered by Telesur. I now have to show you how this is being covered by Politico. And this is actually how it's being covered by Washington Post and many of the other outlets. I love the difference in propaganda is fucking hilarious. So here is Politico. Nicaragua frees more than 200 political prisoners, sends them to Washington. Now, if someone creates a coup against you, is it called a political prisoner? My understanding, the way I view political prisoner, is not someone who's involved in a violent military coup against a government. Now, that doesn't mean, depending on the government, that doesn't mean I wouldn't support certain governments being taken down if there's a brutal dictator. So, but I would understand how, like, if you're fucking actively arming and killing people, I don't know that that's called a political prisoner, because political prisoner to me means you have been locked up just for your politics. You have been locked up for believing something, not for perpetrating a coup. And we have political prisoners in the United States, Stephen Donziger. And then there's framed political prisoners where they're political prisoners because the political prisoners because they were arrested really for their political beliefs, but the U.S. lied and created some scenario in order to lock them up, like Mumia Abu-Jamal. So we have those kind of political prisoners. This is just, they deported the coup creators, and now Politico and New York Times and Washington Post just call them political prisoners. They say Nicaragua has freed 222 political prisoners, all of whom have been flown to the United States, the Biden administration announced Thursday. The prisoners, many of them detained by Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega, amid I'm surprised they haven't said regime yet or dictator, amid a crackdown on critics and political opponents, arrived Thursday. But this was not a crackdown on political opponents. This was a crackdown on people who legit created a coup, tried to create a coup, and killed people. There were people killed. Some of the tactics used in Nicaragua were, one, some people were set on fire. But a common one was to create barricades in the roadways with tires on fire and stuff. But what they do is they put a basically invisible wire across like a highway and or roadway. And so if someone on a motorcycle or moped or whatever, one of those things which are common there, comes through, they could get decapitated, or they could get, at the minimum, knocked off in such a way that could kill them. I think there's a term for those things, but I don't know what it is. But that's the type of thing they were doing. This is not like they were handing out pamphlets that said, "We don't like Ortega." All right. Detained among crackdown arrived Thursday at Dulles International Airport in Virginia, the State Department said. Among those released were political and business leaders, journalists, civil society representatives. Yeah, I'm sure that's Politico's view if it was released. Anyway, I love the difference between these two articles. One is like, yeah, they shipped people that fucking planned a coup against them out of their country because it's Washington's minions. And then the other is Daniel Ortega shipped a journalist to D.C. Besides the fact that if you compare shipping, let's say it was a journalist, if you compare shipping a journalist you're opposed to D.C. with torturing him in Belmarsh prison and planning actually a way to assassinate him at the highest levels, that's what the U.S. is involved in. Ortega just shipped him to D.C. So if the U.S. wants to say we're better than that, we're holier than that, then you need to fucking free Julian Assange, you goddamn vampiric parasite shitheads. All right, so that's what's going on with Nicaragua, and an amazing tactic, which I think all the countries that have had U.S.-backed coups committed in their country should ship the people that the U.S. funded and armed just to the White House lawn. Fucking Haiti and Chile and Argentina and Honduras and Panama and all the countries in Africa that we've couped, and fucking Libya and Iraq and attempts in Iran, and just ship them all to the White House lawn. Say, your problem. All right, so speaking of a rather similar story, now I'll give you a quick refresher because this was several years ago. Some of you may have forgotten some of the details, but the part about Guaido. The U.S. announced several years ago, this pre-pandemic, that Guaido, this guy who had never run for president of Venezuela, is now the president of Venezuela. They just announced it. Never had a single vote for president of Venezuela. He was a representative for a small area of Venezuela. So 80% of Venezuelans had never heard his name. And the U.S. said, hey, the actual president of Venezuela is this guy, Juan Guaido, who went to school in Georgetown, at Georgetown, and was trained by an economics professor that's like a big oil, U.S.-backed goon. Anyway, so they announced this guy Guaido as the president. What happens then is a very legally confusing. Now, for an average human brain, it's not confusing. The U.S. is full of shit. They announced a random person president. Maduro's president. Venezuela actually has more legit elections than the U.S. has, because they actually vote with things you can count, whereas we vote on black box machines that you can never look inside of. And no, that is not a Trump supporting statement. I was saying that for fucking years before Trump stole my shit. We vote on black box machines. You can never, no one can ever prove that what you pushed on that box actually got done. No one. So anyway, they have more legit elections than we do. So Maduro's the president there. They announced Guaido as the president. Now, human brain, easy to understand. But for legally, it created a whole bunch of chaos because there's things like the Venezuelan embassy that are in the hands of Maduro, in the hands of the Maduro government. If the U.S. says some other guy is the president, what happens to those properties? Those properties, according to international law, are considered part of that country. Like the Venezuela embassy in Washington, D.C. is actually supposed to be part of Venezuela. You can't go in there and arrest people with the U.S. authority. That's why Julian Assange was able to stay in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years, and there was nothing the fucking U.S. could do about it except for spy on him endlessly and plan to murder him one day. But eventually, Ecuador, Moreno, fucking sold him out in exchange for $4 billion by the IMF and gave the approval for British cops to go in and arrest Assange. But in general, it is property of that country. So now you may remember that a bunch of protesters, I was one of them, but I didn't live in the embassy. I just went in. I went in before the lockdown. This was back before that word became common. Before the lockdown started in the embassy, I went in to speak and perform, do whatever it is I do for the people there. But after I did that, a lockdown began where they knew the authorities were going to come in soon and try and steal this embassy in Washington, D.C. So they, locked the doors and prepared to wait it out. This went on for days and days. It was well over a month. I can't remember whether it was 2 months or not. Maybe someone knows the number of days. But anyway, that it went on. Eventually, they decided it was too much to have that many people in that embassy because you got to feed a lot of people. They had to sneak in food. So there was a bunch of issues with they'd have all these different techniques for getting around the cops and sneaking food in. One woman from Code Pink got arrested for throwing a projectile. A missile, that quote missile, throwing a missile at the building. You know what the missile was? A loaf of bread. She tried to throw a loaf of bread to the people inside, and they arrested her for throwing a quote unquote missile. Anyway, so they decided that there was too many people to house in the building for a longer period of time. So they whittled it down eventually to 4 people. And luckily, luckily is not the correct word. Joyfully, happily, whatever the word is, I'm friends with all 4 of them. However, and this is a sad moment that I knew I'd get to. One of them, Kevin Zeese, is no longer with us. He passed a couple years ago, and I still miss him because he was a fucking amazing activist and amazing human being. Anyway, I am good friends with Margaret Flowers there, who was Kevin Zeese's partner, and Dave and Adrian, who are seen here. Anyway, so it was ultimately 4 people. Eventually, the U.S. finally, and it took days and days and days of legal wrangling, they decided they could go in and somehow legally arrest these people. The thing that complicated it legally heavily was that the 4 of them had the permission of the Maduro government. The Maduro government had said, yes, you may stay in our embassy. So this is technically Venezuelan property. And the U.S. eventually goes in there and arrests them. It becomes a whole shitstorm in court. Ultimately, they serve essentially no time in prison. I mean, a few days, of course, but essentially no time in prison because the U.S. couldn't prove they actually own this property. Anyway, since that time, several years ago, the U.S. had given the property to the Guaido government, right? A government with no power. Because Guaido and his goons can't do anything. They can't issue visas. They can't. They had literally no power, and yet they had the embassy. So just the other day, and I covered this when it happened, like a month ago, the opposition party of Venezuela decided they're done with the Guaido quote unquote experiment, and they booted him. So now Guaido is done, fully done. Even the U.S. does not say Guaido is the president anymore. Since this Monday, February 6th, the U.S. Department of State took possession of the Venezuelan embassy headquarters, the ambassador's residence in Washington, D.C., and the Venezuelan consulate in New York, according to a Bloomberg report citing people familiar with the matter. This was done in response to the disbanding of the fake Venezuelan diplomatic mission led by Carlos Vecchio after the removal of Juan Guaido as interim president. Carlos Vecchio was one of Guaido's goons. A decision taken by the same far-right groups that maintained the fictional position following U.S. orders. Custody of the properties is due to the fact that, in the opinion of the U.S. diplomacy, and I like this line, it definitely shows a little bit of opinion, but I like it. U.S. diplomacy and their failed understanding of international rules, there is no executive branch currently that represents the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, meaning by the U.S. diplomatic view, U.S. legal view, there is no government in Venezuela, which is fucking idiocy. This disregards the fact that Washington has been sending high-level delegations in recent months to directly negotiate with the government of Nicolas Maduro. I covered that when it started happening. The U.S. is now going to Maduro to try to negotiate getting oil from Venezuela because, as you know, the sanctions against Russia have boomeranged and are harming Americans now. So the U.S. and Europeans. So the U.S. needs more oil. And so we have suddenly decided that Maduro is the head of the government of Venezuela. So we're going to him to try to negotiate ways to get Venezuelan oil because our coups have not worked. The United States would judge the Venezuelan presidency as a political and diplomatic vacuum, a paradox that leaves no doubt that the Guaido project has definitively failed. So this does a few things. One is it totally says the U.S. is agreeing the Guaido experiment has failed, because if it hasn't, then why are they taking over this premises? But beyond just that, it again is the U.S. stealing the Venezuelan embassy. Like for a second time, they're stealing the Venezuelan embassy. It's, I don't know, fucking incredible and ridiculous. And it just shows the insanity of the U.S. when trying to create these coups around the world. The latest, most censored news, which I'm going to show you in a few minutes, is about how the U.S. is a rogue state. We are completely out of line with the entire globe on so many issues. We are a fucking megalomaniacal rogue state, and it's getting increasingly undeniable. But anyway, wanted to give you an update on that story, and wanted to say rest in power to Kevin Zeese. Amazing human being. All right. I am going to get to the story about a city that has the major city in the world that has cut all ties with Israel because it's an apartheid state. I'm also going to show you the latest episode of Most Censored News, and I hope that you will enjoy that. That is all coming up at rumble.com/Lee Camp. This live stream will continue at rumble.com/Lee Camp. It's completely free to watch over there, free to comment. So please go join me at rumble.com/Lee Camp. If you're watching over there right now, nothing changes. Also, please become a member at leecamp.net. That's the way I support this